Welcome to another episode of the Office Altering Hiring and Empowering Solutions podcast. If you're a returning listener, welcome back. And if you're a first-time listener, hopefully you will become a long-time listener. As always, I'm your show host, Molly McGrath, founder of Hiring and Empowering Solutions and creator of this revolutionary podcast. You can check us out at hiringandempowering.com. So today's theme, we're going to dive in. It's going to be quick. And I have Tim Sechler, attorney of Sechler Law Firm in Mars, Pennsylvania, with us today. And Tim is going to speak to us about this concept of a non-attorney salesperson in the conference room. So welcome, Tim. Thanks for being our guest.
Hey, very cool. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I know Meredith in your office and you and I have been speaking about this idea. I know that I've been working with your firm for so many years now. I know you all, you're dear friends, and you're an amazing closer. You just love being in the conference room. Your passion and your giant why is about helping families. You're just a natural at it. It's not sales for you. It's about making a difference. It's about protecting the family. If any of you ever want to listen to Tim's videos or anything of that nature, his personal story is absolutely moving and very empowering of why he does what he does in the estate planning and elder law arena. And then you make this decision to bring in a non-attorney salesperson when that's your unique ability. Talk to us a little bit about making that leap, because I know so many attorneys are fearful about that.
Yeah, well, thanks first for the compliments. So, as we're scaling and growing, the challenge I think for the entrepreneur lawyer is you run out of time, right? I mean, you got to run a business, you got to do the marketing stuff, which I personally find kind of fun, and you have to do legal work. You got to sit at the desk and have that dedicated time to get that done, and you also are responsible for doing the sales. And when it's a small firm and you've got yourself and a couple of support staff or whatever, you have the ability to do that. But as you get busier and busier, you got to find things to have someone else take off of your desk, right? Every 6-9 months, you got to be sort of restructuring your job description. And, for me, I've been in self-employed since 2011, and I've tried it a number of different ways, had a number of associates. I've had, and I still do. But, the idea is that the makeup of the entrepreneurial lawyer, and I think lends itself to being in that client room in the first meeting. We're a little bit of risk takers. We're more, you're comfortable with yourself, comfortable with the subject matter, comfortable with the material, and you're doing the right thing for the client. If you then attempt to, and so as you scale, and you've got to give up some of that because you just need to have someone else in the conference room. Most people default to just hiring an attorney, maybe somebody with some experience, maybe somebody without experience. But then what I had experienced is, their level of commitment to the process or their level of commitment to the product or whatever may not be as high. So you start to see conversion rates fall and average fees fall. And, if you're really committed to what you're doing, none of those are good things. And so it seems to me that after having battled with this for a while, that maybe the skill set that makes a good lawyer and the skill set that makes a good salesperson are not always the same. So, I think that we try to find these unicorn attorneys who are good at everything. They're good at making sure that, for me, estate planning documents say the right thing all the time, and they're good with the follow through, and they're good with that. But that might not be the same skill set that is good for education and a sales role, right? And so, I've decided to sort of bifurcate the two roles in that don't make the salespeople be lawyers and don't make the lawyers be salespeople. And and have been at this now for 6 or 8 months with a non-attorney salesperson, and so far so good. So that's kind of been the background to where we got to why we decided to hire a non-attorney salesperson, and the basis for that decision.
And that was an area that you really liked, being in that initial meeting, discovery meeting, vision meeting, whatever terminology, where it's a meet and greet. You pull out of the client what keeps them up at 2:00 in the morning. You figure out where their greatest pain is, and your goal is for them to walk out with a less, a lighter load than when they walked in with, right?
That's right. And so, and I do enjoy that, but just like a lot of other things, you got to give it up at some point in time, I think. And so when we made our hiring decision, we took our time with it. I ended up hiring someone who I really think has the skill set to do that. And she knew nothing about estate planning when she came to work here. So her name is Nikki. Nikki was actually a marketing vendor to me. She was a salesperson to me for radio advertising. And, we had kind of had our ears to the wind of looking for somebody to do this role, and found out she was looking around, and it didn't take us long to jump on it. But she just has that skill set that everyone loves her. She's the friendliest person you're going to ever meet. In fact, I call her case manager. When we gave her a job title, her job is to manage the case through the process, make sure we're keeping our promises. And that was sort of, the idea for how we were framing the job description. I think 2 weeks after she started here, she gave herself a new title, and she shares it with all the clients. She calls herself the CHO, which is the Chief Happiness Officer, which is, she's just that person to make sure that, and she shares that, I think, in the first 3 or 4 minutes of her initial consultations. And, her job is to make sure that clients happy with the process. They're satisfied with the answers they're getting throughout. And, when you start with something like that, I'm the Chief Happiness Officer here, then it makes it easier to get to those personal issues in the first meeting, talking about the kids and what's going great, what's not going so great, or, the career and stuff. I really think that first meeting is not so much, at least in my office, it's not so much about, what's the name of your executor. It's more about getting to know the family and having them feel comfortable with the process. And she's just really solid at that.
Oh, I think you need to pull up Google and trademark that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. As you were saying that, and you were describing Nikki and how you met her and got her into the conference room. It's really not even about being a non-attorney salesperson. What came to me before you even used the term CHO was it's more of the relationship versus sales, right?
Yeah. That's exactly right. And I think it's probably relevant, Molly, to sort of walk through the process and like where the clients are in our process when they meet with Nikki. So I ascribe to the sort of the workflow where you do a seminar or workshop, you bring people in, you do education, and then you do the first free consultation. Now, some attorneys at that meeting, that first consultation, will attempt to close, and I know, and I know people that are very good at that. I never really attempted to close and get somebody to write me a check in that first meeting. It was always just about getting people to the second meeting. So they've been to an educational hour and a half or so workshop. They come to this first meeting, which is now almost exclusively with Nikki. Occasionally, like if a financial advisor sends me somebody personally, I'll do the initial consultation. But Nikki's doing the bulk of them. And her job is basically just to get them to the second meeting, but answer, give them a good feel, make them happy, make sure that they're understanding the material from the workshop, continue to drill down on the education and do some goal setting. But we don't get into designing estate plans with a non-attorney salesperson or whatever. So what we're doing right now, and I think that this may change over time, but what we're doing right now is she will sort of do some goal setting. She'll go through their family. Everybody's got a pretty good feel and we're getting to know each other. And then at the end, she'll say, well, here's kind of what these options are. Here's sort of what a will does. Here's sort of what a trust does. Here's what an asset protection trust does. Here's what other some other tools. And then she'll discuss pricing, but she doesn't ask for a commitment. So I have 100% almost flat fee. in my practice. And so she knows what the fees are. And I let her explain the fees to the client, always sort of subject to, Tim may shift this up or down depending on the complexity of the thing, but I really never do. But so she's just communicating fees that I've set. She's not setting fees. She's not really, because that's another thing that attorneys, I think, had this sort of mental block around is can a non-attorney be hired to do the work? Is there something in the rules of professional conduct that would prohibit that? And, from my standpoint, I'm actually the one getting hired in the second meeting. She's really just doing an education thing, which is not uncommon in any law practice. When you go to a divorce practice or, a lot of different things, and sometimes people will meet with the paralegal first, so it doesn't have to be an attorney. In my opinion, it doesn't have to be that attorney in the first meeting doing the education. And then so she does a nice job and has a high conversion rate of simply getting people to the second meeting. All right. At the second meeting, that's when I go in and or an associate will go in. And all right, so Nikki kind of filled me in on your situation. Here's what I'm seeing. I understand you're interested in doing this or that, or do you still have questions? And then we sort of walk through the goals that they laid out with Nikki. And then, we typically in that meeting are settling on an estate plan at some point, and then they're signing the fee agreement with me. So the way that I'm structuring right now, she's a salesperson because her job is to sort of tee the thing up for me, but she's not actually converting the sale, which is something that as I'm easing into this, I wanted to be in control of that final conversation because we're just getting to know each other. She's just getting to know estate planning. And so I wasn't comfortable just saying, hey, you need a revocable living trust. She doesn't, in my opinion, have that skill set yet, but she does have the skill set to get them to the next meeting. And that may change over time.
Mm-hmm. And there's a few things I love about what you said. So number one, this anxiety that people have in regards to paying commissions and splitting fees and paying for referrals and things of that nature. What I like about your model is she's not collecting fees. She's not signing engagement agreements. Her goal is to move them to the next conversation, to get them to raise their hand and say, yes, I'm ready to start planning for my family.
Right. And, and you do have to, like everybody listening, should check their own state bar rules and find a level where they're comfortable. I think there's a lot of room for interpretation within some of the bar rules. There's cases in your state, but she does have a variable component to her compensation, but it's not tied to any specific, really one case, which is where you can get yourself in trouble. Like if I'm incenting her more to sell someone a more expensive plan than maybe they need. That's where things like bar grievances and complaints come in. But I do think it's possible to structure a variable compensation structure that's not tied to any one particular client. That's kind of based on quarterly goals and add a variable piece. And yeah, if we're doing better, she can make more money, and we're only doing better if we're selling more cases. But I think you can bifurcate the variable compensation piece from the we're trying to get a big commission off of this one family, because that's just not how we operate. And I think that if you can navigate those rules and find out something that works, then you can make it work for your business, and you can also make it work for this salesperson.
Here, let's talk about objections, because I know some attorneys' heads are spinning here. So number one, you hire a person that has absolutely no knowledge or experience in the estate planning and elder law arena. And you and I've talked about this many, many years. I think it's great because they're not giving away tips, techniques, and a confused mind says no. When you give them too much information, they're like, oh my gosh, thanks for all the value. Now I'm just going to go to Google or my financial advisor lady at church and figure out how to go to LegalZoom and do what you just gave me. So I love that you do that. But let's talk about knowledge and how to get them educated. So when you say she goes over the basics, the difference between a will, a trust, an RLT, or what have you, how, number one, do you get her onboarded in regards to terms of art and the language and the knowledge of what it is that you're doing? And then number two, how does she handle objections? Because this is what attorneys tell me all the time. I can't have a non-attorney person in the sales in the conference room because my clients ask me so many technical legal questions.
Yeah. So first question is, how did I get her spun up? Well, I do the workshop, right? So I made her for about probably 2 or 3 months go to every single workshop. So she heard my workshop stories, we've got these sort of inside stories that we use, the like anti-divorce planning for your kids, whatever. I pick on my son and say he marries, my son's 8, right? But there's this little blonde haired girl in his 3rd grade class who likes to take his markers, right? And so, but then 30 years later, now they're married and she still wants to take his stuff, right? So that's kind of like this sort of light thing about that we use to broach this issue of maybe doing this type of planning. But those simple little stories, then she knows them and she's able to take them to the first meeting. And when she's doing goal setting, she'll say, remember in the workshop when Tim was talking about the little blonde girl that wants to take his stuff? Well, here's sort of what we're talking about, right? So I don't have her, and I don't think it's her place to be to the point where she's advising them on tax apportionment clauses and the rule against perpetuities, right? She's not doing that. But what she's doing is sort of relaying broader concepts of probate avoidance, do you want to protect some stuff from the nursing home or whatever. Now, if she's talking at that level, and then they ask specific questions, she's got the license to just say, that's a great question for Tim in your next meeting. And then, those, and she writes them down. And then I know that those are some things that is on the client's mind when we sit down, right? So the nice thing about going from this first meeting to the second meeting with me is we've already narrowed the issues. We've already identified the client's goals. We've already probably eliminated a couple of things that we don't have to spend a lot of time on. And then when I sit down with the client, I've really got the ability to sit down on the client's goals. And then I take a little bit of a deeper dive on the legal technical with them at that point. And sometimes it takes 2 meetings still. And that's fine. But I think it really if they come up with objections, I think she has the ability to say, well, that's a great question for Tim. But also what I did was when we hired her, I created a pretty lengthy document of frequently asked questions and my sort of common answers to those questions. And I think she's got them pretty well memorized at this point. And so, if somebody says, for example, when my dad died, probate wasn't all that bad, right, or whatever. So a common objection. Then her answer might be, well, that's great for your dad, right? But, we live in a different world. Your dad's financial situation was different than your financial situation. And so, maybe we just need to take it to a little deeper dive on this, right? So she has some common answers to common questions, but at the end of the day, she just forwards them on to me. Now, the second part, I forget the second part of your question. So the education, was that both? That was education and overcoming objection.
Yep. So you answered them both. So number one, how did you get her up to speed in regards to terms of art? So what I heard was you put her in the workshop and she watched and witnessed, got comfortable with the stories, because we all know stories sell, data tells. So Tim's model is very, very much speaking into the listening of his audience in a way that resonates with them and gets them to take action.
And then the other thing that we did is for the first, I would say 90 days, she came to almost every client meeting with me. I paid her for a significant amount of time when I really wasn't getting a lot of bang for my buck, just education time, where she sat in with me doing initial consultations and she sat in with me doing the design meeting, and started to get a feel for, how I handled different issues as they came up. And so now it's she can even say things at this point like, well, when this comes up, Tim usually does this, but I'm going to let him talk to you about it. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I think just watching and learning, and she's kind of a sponge and she's really excited about the opportunity. And so, she's a self learner as well.
And that's a good point. So number one, to tie it all the way back to a step-by-step process, if you will, because attorneys are very literal, and entrepreneurs are, and that's a good thing, is that you hired her because she came to you in a very sales context, number one. And so keep your eyes peeled for the people that are out in your community and selling to you and or coming across your office or your email, or that you meet wherever you are out in the marketplace networking. But you hired her because she was a sponge. So it was a partnership, if you will, where you weren't, she was the right person, right? You knew that she had the capacity and the desire to want to learn and make your job that much easier.
Well, I knew she had the personality for it, and I knew she had the skill set. I mean, she sold it to me, right? So, and having dealt with her for a bit, I knew that she had some sales skills and certainly, sort of top-notch personality skills. But and I think that, and maybe she's a unicorn and you're not going to be able to find somebody like her. I don't know. But the other thing that I think that has worked well here is I gave somebody with a good personality and a good skill set a great mission, right? Because if somebody's out there and they're a great salesperson selling mattresses, well, that's great, but they don't believe in it. They don't really care about the mattress, right? But if you're talking about doing things like, estate planning or planning for your sick grandma or planning even, take it to other practice areas, personal injury, you have been wronged and it's time to try to make this thing right. If you can give somebody with the right skill set a strong mission to get behind, then I think it sort of compounds their ability to really move forward.
And I don't think she's a unicorn per se, as you were saying that. We just hired our second non-attorney salesperson for a patent law firm, very, very successful patent law firm down in South Florida. And the first salesperson that we hired had absolutely no legal experience whatsoever, and neither does the second one. To your point, they have the personality, they're a sponge, they have the desire, they have proof of concept where somewhere they have the KPIs and they have a burning desire to be able to crush it, for a lack of a better term, to make a difference for people. They lead in relationship, they lead and win people over, and they are very, very much mission, vision, and value, cause driven and service driven. It's not just about sales, because I know people are probably rolling their eyes. It has to be about service and it has to be relationship, and the strategic byproduct to that is the sale.
Well, and if you believe what you're doing, if you believe what you're doing is in your client's best interest, there's no shame in selling it. I wholeheartedly believe that my law firm creates fantastic estate plans. And if they don't hire us to do it, they're going to get some crappy job down the street. Right. And so I think it's sort of an obligation to do our best to get them to hire us, because I think that our work is top notch. And so like that gets for me, that sort of has always been, every time I do, one of these plans where we're doing sort of asset protection work, the family walks out and I think, well, there's another family that's not going to lose their house to the nursing home. Right. And so it's not just about ringing the bell because we got a big fee. It's about doing the right thing for the client. And if you can find somebody that gets behind that mission, in what the owner is really behind, then the thing can really do well. And, there's another component, there's another benefit to all of this is, one of the challenges to hiring in a law firm is if you don't do it this way and you got to hire associates. I've got a great attorney working for me right now, and I think we're about to hire another one. But the challenge you always have with an associate attorney is we're unable to do non-compete agreements with attorneys. And so how many times there's going to be people nodding their head listening to this that have spent a lot of time training somebody up to just watch that person's name go on a sign across the street, and with a non-attorney salesperson, they don't have the ability to go open up a law firm. And you can keep the lawyers doing legal work and you can keep the salespeople doing salespeople. And it seems to me that if some of the lawyers are more comfortable just doing the legal work and they're not comfortable doing the sales stuff, that's a great because it starts to affect the people that you can hire for the associate position.
Yeah, that's a great point. As you were saying that, I'm sitting here thinking of the past, 20, 30 conversations that I've had with law firms. And that model, Tim, that you just outlined, it absolutely positively works, and it allows for you to sleep at night. Because there's a few things with people will call me all the time about hiring and say, I need an attorney. And I say, great, tell me what their job description is, what they can do. Well, I need them to go out there and remake, and I need them to handle that initial sales meeting. And mine's always a hard no. Like, you need a technician, because to your point, for that perspective, because not only that, but every time you see somebody hang a shingle across the street, it deflates your entire freaking team and it destroys you. And then you have to constantly rebuild. And that position, to your point of how you train Nikki, she, as you were describing, that you armor with the FAQ, that is high level. It's not about technical legal. And she is communicate not from a place of manipulation, but she is saying, listen, in your next meeting with Tim, i.e. the guru, i.e. the attorney, i.e. the expert, he is going to handle all this for you. And it's not from a place of manipulation or punting it to get the sale. It's really lending that third party credibility for you that she is a CHO. Her job is just to make them feel lighter and happier, more confident, understood, acknowledge, and be hopeful that there is a solution and answer to protect their family and their stuff when they leave. And if you're listening to this and you still believe in that old school mentality that you need an attorney in that conference room, think back to the past few attorneys that you've hired. And if you've never hired one, look to your colleagues. Go talk to them at the bar, at the conferences, or on the listservs, or what have you, because there are miles of horror stories in regards to that model.
Yeah. And ultimately what we're doing, like going back to the very first thing we talked about, I mean, you're ultimately looking to save yourself time, right? You're looking to hand something that you've got to do right now to somebody else. And let's just make up a number and say that in my office, we do 20, 25 initial consultations a month. Well, if those meetings are scheduled for an hour and a half, and then you got 20 minutes of taking notes afterward and getting yourself together and grabbing a cup of coffee, you got 2 hours in each one of those. And so by having somebody take, those meetings off of my desk, I've found an additional 30, 40 hours a month, which now I've got the opportunity to do some other stuff with, right? And the other problem with the more traditional problem is not just they're competing with you, it is that they're wholly responsible for the whole thing. If they're rainmaking and selling and responsible for the legal work, if that one person leaves, you're in a world of hurt, right? But if you sort of bifurcated the work, where I personally would prefer spending some time doing the rainmaking myself, but if we've got the salesperson and then the attorney, if the salesperson leaves, you've still got an attorney that knows their legal technical stuff, right? And so you can support, again, you can get thrown back in and support the sales part without necessarily maybe doing all the legal technical. The associate can do that. Or if the associate leaves, then you still got the salesperson, so you can focus on the legal technical until you can replace that person. But you don't have to lose both of those functions at the same time, which really can hit your bottom line really hard in 30 or 45 days. And so I think it's almost like a risk management opportunity as well.
And as you were saying that, what triggered for me when you said, I actually enjoy doing the rainmaking, which I know you do. Tim is an entrepreneur that owns a law practice. He is very much is business mindset, which most attorneys aren't. So to the flip side of that is if you are a high technician and you're spending, I have some attorneys who tell me on that initial meeting, they're spending 3 hours with an initial consultation. And I'm telling them, you're showing them the spark plugs. You're going way too deep and you're making that into a technical legal meeting. But if you're a technician and you are very much about the legalese, and in that initial meeting, you're very much highly analytical, going and over explaining everything. To Tim's point, the flip side of that is get yourself out of the conference room. Look at your conversion rates. Look at how long you're spending in that initial meeting. Look at your process. And are you making that about being the CHO? Are you making that about figuring out what wakes them up at 2:00 in the morning? Find out how, take 2 hats, put them on the table. How often are you wearing the attorney hat, and how often are you wearing the relationship and enrollment hat of getting them to move, to take the next right move, to plan for their family and their stuff?
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, this is my last question I have for you, Tim, in regards to making this leap of faith, taking this leap of faith of removing yourself as an attorney from the conference room. And I know it was much easier for you because, as I've said multiple times, you are entrepreneurial. Can you talk to us a little bit about the training process of, all right, you make the decision. We already talked about how you found your person. So open your eyes and look for relationship people. Look for people who have sold to you in your community or who have wowed you at the chamber or the networking events or what have you. You make the decision and you bring them in. And people are shaking in their boots a little bit about that. Can you talk to us about how much time you've invested in the beginning with them from a training perspective? Because I heard you said they attend the workshop, they sit in every conference room meeting, which is a fantastic way to protect your time from training. Talk to us about the conversation you're having with the clients and why this person is sitting in the conference room, because that's the objection I hear from people a lot of times. Well, it's confidential meeting. My clients are not going to like having this random person sitting in the conference room. How do you introduce Nikki in the beginning and why she's sitting in the conference room?
I don't. I mean, maybe that's an objection that I'm just not hearing, and people just aren't scheduling because of that objection. But I can't say that I've ever actually had anybody voice that to me. And I think that I personally think that people are used to this process anyway. I mean, think about the time you go to the dentist. Well, the dentist isn't the first person who comes in the room. There's a hygienist. You go to the doctor's office. There's a nurse or a nurse's aide or somebody that comes in first. You got to go to a surgery. You don't get to just go meet the surgeon and have the thing done. There's a process building up to this in a lot of different areas, and so. For us, it's just over 2 meetings. But, I can envision certain medical issues where you go in and you meet the nurse for a meeting and then, okay, we need to send this up the chain a little bit. So I think that people are sort of used to this flow in a professional practice, first of all. Second, I think that the way I sort of frame it, and again, most of these people have been through a workshop. And so they've been through the workshop. I introduce her. She's usually the person greeting them at the workshop, but then I introduce her as I introduce her as case manager in my PowerPoint, but then we have the little joke that she's the chief happiness officer, but then I introduce her there. And then at the end, when at the end of the workshop, I'm walking through it. I typically tend to continue to focus on education, right? This is a process. This isn't a law firm where you just come in and we ask you the name of your executor and you get the same will as the last guy that came through the door. There's options here. I think that a lot of attorneys fail on getting their clients to the point where the clients really fully understand their options, and so they just default to what's easy or simple. And so in mine, we have an 1.5-hour workshop. Then you get a free hour meeting with the case manager. I've given you 2.5 hours of education before you sit down with a lawyer, which to me, then the lawyer is able to have a higher level conversation or a deeper dive or whatever you want to say. So, from my standpoint, I frame it as this first meeting is an education meeting. We're not going to ask you to write us a check. It's low pressure, but you're going to take all the information from the workshop that we just talked about for the last 1.5 hours, and we're going to drill that down in the first meeting. We're going to go a little bit deeper. We're going to focus on what your goals are so that we can eliminate a lot of the stuff that you're really not caring so much about. And then so by the second meeting, when you sit down with me, we've narrowed the focus of the conversation. You already understand generally the pricing model. And when you and I sit down and have that conversation, we really just get to have a sincere conversation about what it is that you want rather than making up stuff about how much is it going to be? And I really don't understand the thing, right? And I really think that it can allow me to jump into the legal work and the actual the real objections or the real concerns a heck of a lot faster. And so I just frame it more as just education. We're an education-based law firm, and I don't think a 1.5-hour workshop is enough. And so there's another educational meeting.
Yeah. And having her sit there too. So from a training process, I would assume you have her sitting in the workshop, she's meeting and greeting. So you're already making that introduction to the client. They already see her face and have shaken her hand and gotten a very warm welcome from her. You have fun with introducing her in the official capacity in the beginning workshop. And then as the audience connects, you introduce her as a CHO. you're debriefing with her after those workshops and those vision meetings or those initial meetings, right? When she's shadowing. And this is a mistake I see a lot of law firms make. They just have them sit, and then the attorney doesn't debrief with them. Say, do you see when I did this? Do you see when did you see the client's face here? Don't you think that's an important piece?
Yeah, I do. I do. And I also think it's another important piece to continue to make yourself open to the person, because Nikki just yesterday came to me and came to me with the first time this client had asked this particular technical question. And Nikki's answer was, I don't know the answer to that. Tim will answer it in your next meeting, but I'll make sure she gets. But then she says to me, what is the answer? Right. And so she's constantly learning. We have those conversations, and sometimes, it's informal over a cup of coffee or whatever, but we continue to talk about the cases that she's had and, what happened yesterday. How did it go? Well, this person, this, that, and the other. And then she's a great note taker. So we go in our client management system. If I'm going into meeting number 2, one, I've already had a conversation with Nikki briefly about what happened in the first meeting, but then she's got fantastic notes before I go into the second meeting. And so I know what we're going in there to talk about. But I think it's important to continue to have those meetings, one, because they're going to have technical questions. And you need to set sort of the parameters around what she's allowed to answer, what he or she's allowed to answer, and then what is actually, let me handle that in the next meeting when they ask about this stuff. The second is, from a sales standpoint, she's learning, or your salesperson is learning, and you can sort of coach them through that. Next time they bring up this, here's sort of a way maybe to explain this situation differently next time. But I think it's an ongoing conversation.
And as you were saying that, another thing is that they can add those additional questions to your FAQ and expand on that as they get things that maybe weren't on the FAQ as well. So it's always a way for refinement in your systems and your process.
Yep. So far, so good for us. I mean, I'm happy with the decision. I think that, and as we continue to grow, we may have multiple non-attorney salespersons. So, we'll see. But so far, I have, with the decision that we made a really good hire, and it's working really well.
Great. All right. Well, that's a good stopping point for us. Thanks again to Tim of Sechler Law Firm for joining us today. Tim, this is awesome. And I know that there's many, many law firms that I've spoken with that have been on the fence about this, and you really outlined it beautifully to make it simple. You have nothing to lose. If you put the time, energy, training, and hire the right person that has a desire for this position, you have nothing to lose. As Tim said, we're 9 months into this. It's working well. He's constantly paying attention to it, refining, communicating with her, debriefing with her. And then when it doesn't work, I loved what you said at the beginning of this. We're reinventing ourselves in our process every 6-9 months. So it's not like you're nailing yourself to, the cross, so to speak, where it's absolute and you can't make any changes. You have nothing to lose by trying it and really embarking on this to free you up to be the entrepreneur, the rainmaker, and to be the relationship builder, to have controlled growth in your law firm, right?
Yeah, I agree. And, just kind of one concluder on my end is I think in talking with other attorneys at bar functions and whatnot, I think one of the objections is they're still concerned about having the rules of professional conduct and the whole thing. And you got to find a level of comfort with that. I personally am of the belief that what we're doing right now is perfectly within the rules of professional conduct. I mean, holy cow, I hired somebody whose sole job is to make clients happy and make sure that they understand what they're doing. I'm happy to take the position if I ever needed to. I do have, I've run into other law firms where they have non-attorneys throughout the process. They never meet with a lawyer. The lawyer doesn't do the design. The lawyer doesn't do the sign. The lawyer doesn't do anything. And I think that, okay, maybe a step too far, right? So, but I think that you can, but I wouldn't take that example as something in my opinion, you probably shouldn't be doing, and just make the concluding thought that I can't do anything like this. Well, look, we have non-attorneys doing stuff throughout the practice. I've got more non-attorneys working for me than I have attorneys working for me. So I do believe that education and working through the process is something that can be delegated to a non-attorney.
Yeah. And I love your tagline on your website. We make planning simple. I mean, is that not a better demonstration of your statement of it's not about being the attorney in every single role and having an attorney in every corner and office that you look into? It's really about taking it down to that fourth grade reading level, if you will, and making it very, very simple and easy and joyful for the client. Because if it's not that, for them, then they get confused and overwhelmed and take no action.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay, so this has been another episode of the Hiring and Empowering Solution podcast. I'm going to put Tim's link to his website on the show notes at sechlerlawfirm.com. And I would highly recommend, if you are in the Mars, Pennsylvania area, stop by, go attend his workshop. Make sure you register so they know that you're coming. And witness this and see the beginning of the process unfold, because it absolutely is about the client and really demonstrating those stories, just like Tim did with his 8-year-old son, and getting them to a place of being able to deeply resonate with that and then to take action, because it is about making planning simple. Until next time, thank you.